Uh, Hello, everyone, and welcome to this very special event, the ICTS Infosys, the Turing Lecture. So these are part of our flagship lecture series. They are typically embedded within a program. The Turing lectures cover topics in biology, computer science, engineering, various things where Turing himself, I think, had an interest and impact. There are similarly the Chandrasekhar lectures in the physical sciences, the Ramanujan lectures in the mathematical sciences. These have all had very eminent speakers come and give a set of 3 lectures. The first one is usually at a colloquium level, aimed at a slightly broader audience, a scientific audience. The other 2 would probably go more in depth into the topic. So that's the structure of these lectures, and they are usually part of a discussion meeting or program, just like this one is part of the current program on neurosciences. So I'm very happy that we have Professor Gabriel Mindlin giving this a particular installment of the Turing lectures. He's traveled a long way to be here. This was a visit that was supposed to happen in 2020, but I'm glad at least 5 years later it could happen. And so I will actually now invite Professor Ram Ramaswamy, one of the organizers of the discussion meeting, to give an introduction to the speaker and proceed with the talk.
Thank you, Rajesh. I should also say that it's a very good thing that this lecture couldn't happen in 2020. In particular, the work that goes into the first talk was not done in 2020. So there's some benefits to having a pandemic stop all your life in other dimensions. It's a distinct pleasure for us to have Gabriel Mindlin give this set of talks, partly because this opens a very unusual a window that opens into a very unusual part of science and an area of biology where physics has important things to say. In an earlier session today, we heard a little of Gabo's tortured route to how he came to do this kind of work. I'm not going to repeat that particular story, but it was an unusual route. He did start as a mathematician, virtually a mathematical physicist, who wandered into this area much to the fortune of this particular branch, the physics of birdsong. Gabo is from Argentina, as has already been mentioned. He was educated at there's a small town called La Plata, where he got his degrees. And then he got his PhD at Drexel University in the United States, working not in birdsong, but also in some other areas of, he was working in lasers and other such stuff. One of the first recognition, the first time I came across his name was in a very nice textbook in the early days of textbooks in nonlinear dynamics. There's one by Solari and somebody and Mindlin. It was a nice introduction. It was a very accessible one, and one that has either been pirated or made available in the Indian market. Probably pirated, Gabo. I'm sorry to say you don't get any royalties from that, but generations of students have benefited from the pirated version of your book. All right. He then, after his PhD, he went to Spain, did a postdoc and an actual job at the University of Navarra, and then came back to Buenos Aires, where he eventually started his lab and established it. Today, he's a full professor at the University of Buenos Aires, running the Nonlinear Dynamics Laboratory, which is unusual. It is a laboratory set up by a theoretician to study both physics and biology. So it's unusual anywhere, and especially in Argentina. Now, I had occasion to, to sort of describe his work in a more eulogistic and formal way. So let me just read out, because I did write this, that over the past 2 decades and more, Professor Mindlin has made fundamental contributions to the study of birdsong through imaginative experiments and deep theoretical insights. He has led research that has had a major impact in uncovering the physical process of avian vocalization and the role that it plays in evolution. The discovery, and this is among the things that he will tell us today, the discovery that certain bird species rehearse songs during their sleep is an unusual and one of the things that he has done. He has uncovered the neural mechanism underlying the activation of birdsong using methods of what is very fashionable these days, deep learning, to synthesize new songs and reconstruct old ones, which is what we will, I hope, hear a lot more about today. His work displays great originality and represents one of the finest and most useful applications of dynamical systems theory, with far-reaching implications and unexpected ramifications in both physics and biology. Gabo, it will be a pleasure to hear you describe your work. And before you actually give your talk, we acknowledge.
Thank you. Thank you, Ram, for the presentation. Thank you, Ram, Nelima, Amit, and the ICTS for the invitation. For me, it's a pleasure to be here. I always love coming to India, and it's a great honor to be in charge of the Turing lectures in this occasion. After your words, Ram, all I can do is start to disappoint you. I'll do my best. And what I want to share with you is a story that actually started because of the pandemic. And I thought it was a good way to introduce these 3 lectures. Because as you know already, because you've heard Anna this morning, in our lab we are interested in the study of the biophysics of birdsong production and learning. And it has different scales, of course. We've been talking about the neural aspects of it in the morning, and this is one of the issues in which many researchers are working. But behavior emerges out of the interaction of a nervous system, a biophysical device, an environment. So it has to be described at different scales. And this is one of the problems when we study physics and biology. There are many different scales. It's very difficult to do this passage from one scale to the other. We lack a formal theory of out of equilibrium, statistical mechanics, so we can study what happens with one neuron, with a few neurons, with a few hundreds of neurons. It's very difficult to do the mathematical theory that allows you to go from there to behavior. It's not like in physics where we understand Newton's law. We have statistical mechanics and we can explain thermodynamics. We are still not there in the physics of life. So sometimes we have to choose a scale and describe the problem at that scale. And physics has many tools to do that, but we still are doing that in separate ways. I'm going to start my series of lectures describing the problem of birdsong at the level of behavior. So it's going to be a very simple talk about behavior. So the story with which I'm going to start these lectures is a work that started during the pandemic, where I was supposed to be here, but I couldn't because we're all locked down. And I lived close to a state park, and we couldn't go to the lab for 2 years. Argentina had a very long lockdown, so in the university we couldn't go to the labs for 2 years. I had many students, many undergraduates that had to do work, that had to do some lab work, and we couldn't go to the lab. But eventually we could go to open places. So I said, well, let's go to the park. Let's try to do something there. And I'm going to be describing the adventures of this guy, who is a songbird, like the one. So it's like, it's a songbird. So it's one of the birds that need to learn their vocalizations. You've probably heard already that there are 10,000 species of birds. Half of them are resign birds. They need to be exposed to a tutor in order to learn their vocalizations. So their vocalizations are not completely innate. And this is one of those cases. It's Sonotrichia capensis. It's a small bird that learns the song, but it's a unique song, and it will repeat it over and over. So for those of you who, of course, are not in the field of birdsong, what does it mean to learn? Well, in the lab, probably is to be exposed to a song and eventually manage to repeat it. But in the field, for example, in these pieces, it means concretely going to school. So here is a school for these birds. So what we're looking at is a tree here, where an adult will go every day and will repeat the song over and over. And here you have a bunch of juveniles. For each point, I'm denoting a position where this juvenile was trying to learn to sing. So those are juveniles, which are characterized by small vocalizations that still don't manage to make the trill at the end, and they will practice over and over. Here, these 4 points are denoting 4 microphones that I put there in order to compute the exact location of each of the birds. So when the bird is singing, of course, the signal arrives at different time to these different microphones, and using the difference in the time of arrival, I can infer which are the positions. So I can track where every bird was practicing the song when it was a juvenile. And a few days later, for example, you see that they are going exactly to the same positions, just like when we go to school and we sit exactly in the same place, okay? So the adult is singing in the same place, and the juveniles come there until eventually another male claims the territory, or the learning period closes, which for many species happens once in a lifetime, okay? They have a few days, few months where they're open to be exposed to the tutor and reconfigure their brains, and then that window of opportunity closes and they enter in a regime that is called crystallized song, and they won't change the song anymore. So by the end of January, they stop vocalizing, and nothing happens until eventually the next spring. And here you see one of the students going back to where it learned, okay? This was the song of the juvenile. You can see these very shaky, okay, frequencies. By the way, this is a representation of the song. This is time. This is the frequency. It's like a continuous version of a script. Okay, it's called a spectrogram. You take the sound, take a small window, you analyze by Fourier, and you sweep the window. So each of these marks corresponds to a syllable. If the mark goes down, means that the syllable starts at a high frequency and the frequency goes down, okay? So here you see these shaky shapes here, but the shapes are approximately the same that will emerge in a more secure way in an adult. So this is what happens with the guy that already learned the vocalization. And for these species, these birds are highly territorial, and once that they are adults, they claim a piece of land and they will start to sing. Why do they sing? They sing for 2 reasons. They sing to claim their territory, and they want to show to the females that they are very smart, very fitted, and they can do what they do very well. And somehow here, and we try to unveil where, they are claiming that they're very good for being good parents, okay, for future generations. Each one claims a territory, and by the end of the pandemic, I knew exactly where each of these birds were, because they are very territorial and they sing unique songs. As you can see, the shapes of these patterns are very similar. but they are not identical. Typically, they consist of two parts. One is called the theme, and the other one is the trill. This is an identity signature. Every individual has an identity that is expressed by the exact shape of the theme. And the trill is something that is dialectic. So for example, all in La Pampa, the trill rate is very similar, but if you go to the northern part of the country or to the southern part of the country, the trill changes. Because since there is learning, there is culture, and some features are transmitted from generation to generation. So in this species, this is a signature of where they come from, and this is the name. So that would be, I am Gabo from Argentina. And this would be Ana from Argentina, okay? Well, with the exception that females don't sing. But, okay. So I was having fun recording these birds because I didn't have so many other things to do during the pandemic. Yes.
So you said the juveniles learn from the adult.
Yes.
So when do they develop their signature? Is it during the time of the learning or later?
That's a beautiful question. So what they learn from the tutor is a mystery because they don't necessarily copy exactly the same number of syllables. Typically what they have is they make a representation of how they should sound like, and when they repeat, they will make some mutation to the theme. And that happens very early in the development. So in the first stage, they listen to, and when they start their first practices, they already have their unique signature there. Okay, so it's in the period in the transition from listening to starting to produce it, that you have this unique modification. Some will try to copy it, and some things are preserved. So there are many ones that will say, for example, they will sing with 2 upsweeps and 1 one-sweep. But the exact heights and so on, they will have variations, and that's the identity. So as I was saying, by the time of the pandemic, after a few months, I already knew every one of these guys. But I also came across a reference that got my attention that I loved, actually. It was a paper from the 60s that this guy, Fernando Noteban, had written in 1966. Now, Fernando Noteban is a guy now retired from Rockefeller University. He's a very famous biologist who discovered neurogenesis in adult brains. So this is a guy who made significant contributions in the 70s. But he was Argentinian by origin. When he was 18, he left the country. But he had to return when he was 20-something because he was asked to return for the military service. And he had to do the paperwork to try to skip that. During those times that he was doing that paperwork, he would go to the park and he would take notes, handwritten notes like this, leaving track of how the frequencies would go, an upsweep, a downsweep, another downsweep. And when he returned to, just to give you an idea, digital recordings started in 1972. So at that time, that guy couldn't go and take a tape and do recordings in the field, and doing a spectrogram was impossible. There were pieces of hardware that were invented during the Second World War, but that were not very frequently found. He had one in Rockefeller University that was a piece of hardware that you would use in order to print on a thermal paper, okay, the spectrographic analysis of the sun. So what he did is he took notes by hand, then he returned to Rockefeller and he calibrated himself. Tried to do that in a paper now. So what he did is he played a song, guessed what it was, analyzed it with a spectrogram. He found that they were similar, and he published that as proof that he was very good taking notes by his ear. Okay, now you go and try to publish with that. But anyways, thanks to the editor who was open enough to do it, I knew what was sung in the 60s in that park. So I said, well, that's great, because now I want to see whether these birds are singing the same things or not that in the 60s. So how do you do that? So what we thought of doing was to use some tools of artificial intelligence to build some neural networks to try to compare the present sonograms with the sonograms that Nottebohm wrote in the 60s. So the architecture that I chose in order to do that is a Siamese network. A Siamese network is a structure, it's a neural network that is a couple of convolutional neural network. Convolutional neural network is the canonical neural network to analyze images, okay? So you train, okay, with images that go as input into the first layer, and you have a final layer that can be associated to categories or be an abstract representation of the data. But if you train two of those in similars, you can urge the network to map two things that you claim belong to different classes to 2 points that are far away in that abstract representation space. Or you can train the network to map two images that you claim belong to the same class to 2 points that are very close in the last layer. So you use this network to define a metric that will allow you to compare how similar two images are. Now, the problem that I had, of course, is that on one hand, I had handwritten notes, and on the other hand, I had real sonograms that I compute with present technology. And if you train a neural network to compare these things, what the neural network will say is, these are artificial and these are drawings, something like that. So what I had to do is to make synthetic sounds that correspond both to the present songs and to the older songs. So I had to use a unique way of generating sounds that were consistent with what was sung in the 60s and what was being sung in the present. In order to do that, well, let me show you what I found first. This is what the neural network tells me corresponds to all the themes of the songs that are sung today. So each point in here corresponds to a song, okay? And as you can see, there are many different types of songs because there are different themes. Eventually here you have two birds that are copying the same song, but eventually you have mostly different songs. And when I superimposed what was recorded in, what was registered by Nottebohm, what I found is that many of the themes are different, but there were some songs that are still being sung. I call them the hits of the 60s because they were sung in the 60s and they are still being sung today. And by this objective measurement, you can say that those ones did not change. Many evolved, but those ones were great hits still being sung. So once that I have that, I thought that there was something still more interesting, that there were songs in here that Nottebohm reported as being sung in the field that were no longer sung. So I began to get obsessed on whether I could reintroduce this song into the repertoire of the birds. Now, at that point, I found an opportunity to do something that it was really important to me as a physicist working in a biological problem, that is, testing the pertinence of simple models. What do I mean by this? Physics loves simple mechanisms, simple equations. The smaller the number of equations, the better physicist you are told to be. And biologists, if you work in physics and biology, or you are interested in physics and biology, you know that whenever you start to do a model, the biologists will start to be tense, right? Usually, whenever you say that you're simplifying, the biologists will get nervous. You say, I have an equation, and you will see it's like, listening to a very, like scratching with your nails in a blackboard, something like that. And there is a reason for that. It's not that they hate mathematics or models, but they love their founding fathers, and specifically Darwin. And for them to be serious is not identifying a basic mechanism, but to framing something in evolution. You have to frame things in evolution to be rigorous in biology. So whenever you say, I'm simplifying this, they say, well, there they go, 100 million years, right? That it took that for that species to develop that. So it's very difficult to talk with someone who thinks that to be serious is different from what you think is being serious. So it's not that they don't know the math, it's that they have a different culture. For them, you are not being serious when you're simplifying. For you, they're not being serious if they don't want to go to the core of the basic mechanism. And that's a cultural problem, which is not easy. And it's not that they don't know mathematics. They learn mathematics, like we discussed before. You take any bright student in biology, he goes to a nonlinear dynamics course, they will know the same nonlinear dynamics as a physicist. But they like framing the problems in a different way. So when I claim that I've been working for years with low-dimensional models, I have to show to my colleagues that they are pertinent. And there are many ways of doing that kind of test, and many of my works, and I'm going to be describing them in the different lectures, have been how to convince the pertinence of the models. When I talk about models, and of course, if I can use these models to train a bird to sing, I will be very happy. So let's see what I'm talking about when I'm talking about models. This is the physicist version of how a bird generates the song. Well, at least this is the avian vocal organ for ocine birds, which are 4,000 species, right? So you have a pair of labia here at the juncture of the bronchi with the trachea. Then you have the trachea and the oroesopharyngeal cavity. These kind of folds here are like the human vocal folds. You have two sound sources, but they behave very similarly to the human voice production mechanism. If you say ah, and you put your hand in here, you're going to be feeling a vibration. Those are the vocal folds that are set in motion when the air passes through. For this labia, it's very similar. So part of the essence of the model is modeling these dynamics in here. Let's say for the sake of simplicity here, in this talk, we're going to be talking about more interesting models tomorrow, but let's say that we have a relaxation oscillator here, and we're going to be deriving that tomorrow. But that is capable of setting eventually the labia in motion when the parameters that represent the negative dissipation are positive. So here you have some elastic material with some restitution, some nonlinear dissipation, and the positive transfer of energy that happens when you blow in between two elastic materials that are capable of having two modes, a wave-like mode and a lateral motion. We'll see this tomorrow. But let us say that eventually you can turn oscillations on, and this will give the oscillations of the source. Then, of course, you have to filter the signal, and that is a passive filter, okay, that we learn in basic physics that takes into account the reflections, the internal reflections in the tube, and the filtering by the cavity here. And of course, you have to generate some time-dependent evolution of these parameters in order to recreate the actual shapes. What do I mean by this? In order to turn the oscillations on, I have to increase the value of this parameter that will generate self-sustained oscillations. And the restitution constant depends on the elasticity of those labia that is controlled by this. So how do I generate sound? Well, I blow air, that means I increase beta. And in the process, I might stretch the labia a little bit. So if I do those two things in a delicate equilibrium, I can manage that during the phonation, the frequency increases, for example. Well, I can then model the time dependence of the fundamental frequency, and eventually I can copy whatever behavior that I want. And all these sounds will have the right spectral content because all these terms will account for the right spectral content of the sound. How did we test this over the years? It took us a long time to do that. For example, this is an experiment that we did with Anna when Anna was in Chicago. This is a zebra finch, and as Anna was mentioning, when a zebra finch is asleep, if it listens to its own song, the neurons that were active when the bird was generating the song will spike when it listens, being asleep, the copy of that sound, okay? So what I'm showing here is 20 times the repetition of the experiment of having the zebra finch sleeping and listening to a copy of its own song. In here, what Anna was doing is taking the birdsong song and playing the reverse song. So it's the same frequencies, but in a different order. And these neurons were spiking, paying no attention whatsoever to the song. The same if you play the song of another zebra finch, nothing happens. But when you play the synthesis that you get with the low-dimensional model, what you get is a response similar to the response of the birdsong song. So this was the first indication that the low-dimensional model was good enough in order to be pertinent for the bird. Let's see how this synthesis sound. This is the birdsong song. Oops. There's an echo, okay. This is the reverse song. Okay, and this is a synthetic. Okay, so the low-dimensional model with the right bifurcations and so on, we'll discuss this tomorrow, was able to elicit the same responses. But I was really curious, what would happen if in the field I would create a synthetic sound? Could I cheat a bird and try to teach a juvenile with a synthetic song? So what I'm showing you here is a kind of acoustic robot that we built. It's built with the cheapest technology you can imagine, just Arduino programmable processors, and it has the capacity of doing playback at the program time, okay? And they will be playing at certain times the songs that I previously recorded here. So what I did is I took a bunch of juveniles and I've hit a couple of robots, actually 3 robots, that they were systematically singing the song that was lost. One of the songs that was sung in the 60s and was no longer sung. So typically, the birds are competing for their territories and they are singing vigorously. My robots were great. They wouldn't take a break. They were enthusiastically singing at the right time, not getting tired, and they were relentlessly putting in fashion this song in region of the park. And of course, I had no idea whether this would make sense or not. Before doing this, I had to test that they would pay an attention at all, no? Before doing it with juveniles, what I tried to see was whether an adult would think that this was a real threat or not. So actually, the first experiment that we did is to take a song of an adult, copy it, and use it to try to intimidate another adult in the park. So this would be the song. This is the synthetic copy. I don't know if you can hear it because it's being played twice. So this is a bunch of songs and a bunch of synthetic songs that were generated by a low-dimensional dynamical model. And I would do this. Whenever there was an adult protecting a territory, I would hide the robot that would sing the song of another guy, and I would look at the reaction. So what these birds do when they hear an invader is they start to sing faster, okay? By faster, I mean more times per unit of time. Okay, if they were singing 3 songs per minute, they will go to 5 or 6 songs per minute. So here it is, the result of these birds that were singing typically maybe 3 songs per minute until I start to play the song. And I play just for a little bit, and they go nuts. They go crazy. They start to sing much more. And then eventually they realize that nothing happens and they will decay. So the effect of the real songs, if you play in the robot a real song, is the green curve. Something of another species is the red curve, and with the synthetic song, what you see is this. And if you do a wedge test, you see that the response is impossible to distinguish. So they will react to the low-dimensional model exactly in the same way as if it was the song of a real bird that is trying to invade the territory. Let me show you what happens when a bird faces a box. So this is going to be difficult to catch because I wasn't planning to this as part of the research. This is my cell phone. Here you will see the juvenile, and hidden here is the robot. You will see the spectrogram of what's going on in here. And you will see the very shaky attempts to try the first syllables, okay? And then what happens when the box starts to sing. So here's the juvenile. Okay, these are the 2 little syllables, okay? The box. And he feels compelled to sing again. So, as you can see, the effect of the adult or the robot is to try harder, okay, singing louder and with sharper, features. Let me show it again because it's very weak. The song, and now, inspired by the robot, try a little bit harder. So this was experiment. Now hide 3 of these robots and put in fashion, okay, make fashionable the song that was lost, okay, since the 60s. This song is very difficult to, it's very easy to notice that it's not sung because none of the birds that were recorded in the last years has the second syllable being a downsweep. So this feature in here is the one that is being lost in the fields. So during several months, nothing would happen. And we never saw a bird approaching the boxes. It was very disappointing. And suddenly, analyzing the recordings, we found very weak a juvenile that was singing with a synthetic box, okay? It doesn't have the trill because it's a juvenile, but it had the little downsweeping here. So this is the feature. This is the feature that we were shooting for and that appeared for the first time. This song was recorded a few weeks before the end of the season of the practices, okay? And we lost the bird. We lost the bird completely. Until the next end of the winter. So here you have, with the same neural network that we were analyzing the songs before, the playback, and we have the first practices that were this one in here, okay? The ones of the box, the first practices, and these two songs that appeared in the next season. These two, one of those, probably this one, is the same adult, the same guy that was a juvenile here that was an adult, and this was a new bird that was learning the song. So I had to find it, and eventually I did. So here it is as an adult, and let's see how it sounds. Okay. Can you catch the second frequency that is down? Pa, 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 pa. Okay. So we could find the syllable here. So we're very happy because last month, this guy made it to National Geographic. It was, so we told the story and they picked it, and it was cover of National Geographic. We're very happy about that, very proud of it. But for me, it was, this is actually, I stole from them the picture and the title of the talk. For me, it was important for the following reasons. The first one, that is going to be a theme along the 3 lectures. Are the minimal models in biology pertinent? And I think that this is a question that whoever is doing physics and biology has to ask. Is it pertinent? Is it asking something that for the biology is not an oversimplification? And whatever effort one has to do in order to do the extra mile of doing that, I think it's very important. For me, once that I convinced biologists that I could elicit a neural response or I could teach a juvenile with a low-dimensional model, it was the first time they were paying attention to a low-dimensional model and say, okay, low-dimensional models are okay. It's not the elegance of the model, it is whether they can perform or replace a behavior that they observe. This is a test that I would encourage any young person doing physics and biology to try to do. More in particular, can a juvenile take a synthetic song as a tutor? The answer is yes. And this is an idea that I'm playing with a lot these days, which I started to think about because of this work. Usually when we think about biodiversity, we think about genetic biodiversity. We think about the genes. But there is so much in the animal kingdom that is not genetic, that is part of a culture. There is an animal culture. And when we threaten a population, we're threatening not only the genetic biodiversity, but also the cultural biodiversity, okay? So there is a culture in the animal kingdom. There are many behaviors which are learned. This one is just one of them, vocal behavior. And when you threaten a population, you threaten the cultural biodiversity as well. This is for me a way, an experiment, a tool of showing how we can preserve it eventually. So what are we doing with this? This kind of technology we found has a very interesting possibilities in terms of conservation. One of the things we're doing is using artificial intelligence and dynamics together for conservation. For example, what we're doing is the following, is trying to find and follow the individuals of very threatened populations. For example, in Patagonia, well, there are many regions in the planet that the habitats get so fragmented that the populations that are highly adapted to that place vanish, day by day. For example, this is the macaque tobiano, which is a macaque. There are 800 exemplars in the world. This is gallineta chica. There are another maybe 500 exemplars of this. And we're trying to use this technology and artificial intelligence to follow every individual and try to see where their threats come from and so on. This is another species we're working with, is Cardenal amarillo. It's also a threatened species, and we're trying to follow every individual by their voice and try to really understand what's happening. One of the things we're understanding is that this species is being threatened because for the low number of individuals that there are, the females are choosing to breed with the close species, and of course their juveniles are not fertile. So we're identifying these kind of things because we can follow every individual at the time. And with this, I would like to finish this lecture by showing what I'm talking about when I talk about low-dimensional models, their pertinence, and behavior per se. Tomorrow's lecture is going to be about how to develop these models, how to measure the variables that drive these models, how to develop the technology and the electronics to measure those activities. And the third lecture will go deeper into the problem of the brain, and particularly, like Ram was saying, which is the role of dreaming in this process of learning. But I think that we had enough for one day, so I thank you very much for your attention. Yes.
Synthetic songs, the birds can copy that. I wonder if that's been transferred to next generation.
Say that again. Sorry.
So say a bird copied your synthetic song and learned it.
Yes.
Can it teach it to the next generation?
So if that bird is teaching to the juvenile,
Song
yes.
passed down.
Yes. So this is what we are following now, and the answer is yes. We had that juvenile, had two juveniles that is teaching the song to, and we're going to follow the evolution of those juveniles. We have to ring them now, because if we get into being quantitative, we have to ring them to be able to identify them. But when we found this guy as an adult, it was singing to two juveniles, and we have movies of the two of them. So it's been passed. Yeah. Yeah.
So I was also wondering whether one could create an artificial bird song now that you know some of the elements, and try to figure out which ones might click, so to say.
Exactly.
And which ones won't. Is there?
Beautiful question. Two parts. The first part, could they copy whatever? The answer is no. And which ones would be very illuminating to understand the neural architecture that is innate, because part of these things are learned and part of these are innate. And what they can do is mostly innate. How they combine them and stuff is learned. So there are some things that they won't be able to learn, and it's very interesting to know what. Those are long experiments, are difficult experiments, but it's a beautiful question, and I think it's very informative in terms of the neural connectivity that you are required to generate something or another. So this is one question. Another interesting thing is that even if you teach and you mess up a lot, the interplay between learning and what is programmed will play a role. Let me give you an example. The first experiment that I did when I started with this, I did an experiment with canaries, and I generated a synthetic song that was partly similar, syllable by syllable, it was similar to a canary song. But instead of being like a machine gun of repetitions, like a typical canary, it would change smoothly. It was like a drunken, canary. And the juveniles in the lab learned to copy that. But when the spring came, they just forgot about that, and they started to do the stereotyped songs. So there is a competition in between what you learn, the parameters that you learn, and the programs that emerge genetically, which is a fascinating problem and still very open. So,
no, I was remembering a video clip from one of David Attenborough's documentaries, in which there is some bird which was able to copy the sound of a saw in the forest. I mean, it would just copy anything that was almost played. So is it that some birds have that extremely well adapted to?
It's exactly that. Because it's very difficult for us to keep in mind, as there are 10,000 different species. And in some species, like for example, this one or the zebra finch, you can learn just one song, and others learn many songs, and others have an infinite repertoire and the capacity to imitate. So what does it tell you on the neural architecture? Because you have to generate very subtle physiological gestures to do something like that. So you have to have a control of your neural structure to generate that neural pattern that is different than the one of a canary, for example. This is still wide open. Yeah.
Questions, actually. The first one is sort of the lines of that was asked. So regarding in humans and rodents, it has been shown this FOXP2 gene has been associated with vocal learning particularly.
Right.
So I was wondering that if you can think about an experiment or somebody has done this in birds, manipulating the FOXP2 gene and training them on this artificial songs and see whether we can still under manipulations of the FOXP2 gene, we can still train them to make these sounds or vocalization.
Yeah. So there is a woman working on that is called Constance Scharf that works in Berlin, and she's been working with FOXP2 in birds. FOXP2 has a wonderful effect, which is very suggestive in birds, that it not only affects, obviously, the capacity to learn, but also it affects the development of the vocal organ that is necessary to sing, now showing you that the muscles that are going to be innervating the vocal organ are strictly connected to the neural architecture, and they evolve together, okay? It's a beautiful story that is still being written. So I will refer you to the work of Constance Scharf. That doesn't go that as far as to manipulating it and looking at how it affects the learning, but it's work doing on the effect of FOXP2 on learning, and the answer is yes. It is done in birds, and we have to follow the literature by Constance.
The second question is more like, it's, I guess, I don't know, it's pretty naive. But when we talk about this, I also work a little bit on music cognition and, with humans. So some of the things that we think are going on, particularly when we are listening to songs, is we are focusing on the emotion aspect in the song.
Right.
So is there something like analogous to that in the bird song? I don't know how would you model that, but is there some emotion component to these songs? In which case the vocalization would be better learned, for example, in some case when the emotion is lacking, is not learned, something like that, in the behavior sense.
Yeah. So that opens like a whole new talk. But let me tell you the title of it. Yes, attitude matters. If I listen to a couple of chingolos or a couple of canaries or a couple of zebra finches, I will have no doubt who will have more success with the female. There is an attitude, an assertiveness in the way they express their song that is very clear. Now, what I didn't do yet are the experiments that will show which are the acoustic features or which are the parameters that carry that signal. That I still didn't do. What I'm doing now in the field is something similar, because the advantage of having a low-dimensional model is not to say, you are very smart and you got a model. The advantage of doing a low-dimensional model is that you can manipulate and do new experiments, right? One of those experiments is exactly that. What is intimidating for another bird? What is sexy for another female? Okay, so these are the things that you can do by manipulating these things. For example, the thing that we're doing is checking whether being able to generate higher frequency amplitude gestures in a smaller amount of time, that means a measure of performance, is seen as intimidating or as sexy. So this is a simple parameter I can play with. So intensity or range of frequency are clear parameters that one can try to see and test if they are good enough in order to be more intimidating or more sexy. And the kind of experiments that you have to do are like the ones I was showing you before. You have to change the parameters and quantify, in a way, the responses that you will get in a way that is quantifiable. So those are very difficult experiments because they are massive. For example, the one I'm doing now in checking the level of performance, I am halfway through in this season, and I have 1,500 protocols that in order to avoid self-replication, I have to do on at least 15 different animals with 15 different songs, sharing this unique parameter. So there are long experiments, are difficult to do, but I agree with you, it's a wonderful question, a very important question. The other thing is the relationship with music, and that is another talk altogether. So is there evidence that this is music in the sense that we call music, in the sense of using intervals or things like that? No. You can take music from anywhere in the world. Western music, Indian music, Chinese music, Inca music. Go into a unique scale, model the fundamental frequency, and average all the spectrum, and you will see the fifth interval all over the place. And that implies that music in humans evolved to be played together with instruments or with other people, because there is a reason for why the fifth is present in every culture. But you go with birdsong and you do the analogous transformation, and all those intervals vanish. So if they express something, it doesn't have the same structure as the music in humans. So there is intention, there is communication, there is attitude, but not music. So, and that's all I have to say.
Thank you so much. That was really interesting. I had a question. Do we know why songs are lost? And when they are reintroduced, does that have an impact on how cool the bird is, that it's singing a song that was lost in the 60s?
Okay, so you bring a very important aspect that is the ethical aspect of this work. And I have no problem because I fought with this question before doing the experiment before. So the bureaucratic answer to this is, in order to do any of these experiments, you have to ask permissions and you have to convince someone else to do it. But also why I think there is no danger. The reason for which this song was lost, in my opinion, is that this park, that was a huge park, got invaded by private small farmers that were taking parts of the park, and most of this population, and the population shrank. So the most popular songs are still being sung, and the ones that were sung by fewer individuals were lost just because there's fewer individuals. So introducing in the field a new song is a responsibility, but my claim is that it's a song that was already autochthonous of the place and only disappeared because there are less number of individuals. So I'm pretty certain that it's not a hazard for the population.
Absolutely. I was actually wondering, is there any way to sort of tell, once the old song is reintroduced, how it's received? Is there any way to sort of get a sense of, for instance, like how is it received when the old song comes back? Is there any way to say?
If it's going to be like a very successful guy or not? Well, that's a beautiful question, and I didn't think of it. Sorry. No, it's a beautiful question because in different species, what is different? Okay, so there are some species that like songs. So let me start again. There are species where the females like the guys that sing like their dad. And there are species where the females hate the songs that sound like their dad. So the same fact, that is that you learn the vocalizations, has a completely different effect on different species. So in this one, I don't know what's going to happen with these two guys. So we'll figure it out, because I asked permission for ringing them, so maybe we'll figure it out.
The song or the singer? So you mentioned these attributes like assertiveness, etc. So does it really matter what they're singing or how they're singing it?
Well, so the answer is I don't know. But let me tell you what I think. Before doing this experiment, I would have thought that this experiment was not going to work. So actually, and why? So actually, the guy doing the field work with me, Roberto Vistel, he was finishing his PhD with this work. Okay, the model is good enough to be intimidating. And when I told him, let's try to do this, he looked at me like if I was crazy. And I didn't want him to put that much time into that. Actually, I went to the field to change the batteries myself because I didn't want him to waste the time. Because I thought that without seeing the actual bird, only with the robot, it wouldn't be enough to take it as a tutor. So even I thought, so Anna and I were thinking about building an actual model that would come up or something like that, because we thought that the actual image was going to be important. Actual Constance Scharf, the same wonderful German biologist working on FOXP2, she showed that in the lab, the birds learn better if they see the model and so on. So it's the singer altogether, okay, with a lot of features. Now I don't know, because they got it from a box just because I put it fashionable in the park. So maybe now I'm more confident that the song carries really a lot of information and not the whole package of visual displays or not. But it's something that I only argue because of the result of this experiment. Previously, you could have convinced me very easily that it had to do with the physical display and so on. These guys never saw a model singing. They just heard that it was fashionable in that region of the park.
Yes, thank you very much for the talk. I was wondering, I was very fascinated by the handwritten recordings from fellow scientists. And I was wondering if he also recorded the background, because with a machine, this also comes with, which would then again somehow, in the ethical question, tell something, I guess. Because if you record, you do field recording now with a microphone,
right,
you get the surrounding. I was just wondering if he also just recorded the birds or the... Yeah.
So what he did is he just took the handwritten notes. He had no recording at all because he, in the 60s, he didn't have even the tape recorder. He was just taking the handwritten notes. So we have no idea of what was the noisy environment there. We just have recordings of the modulation of frequencies of the songs. And when I generate the synthetic sounds, I generate them, is the synthetic sound of this low-dimensional model, and it's played with the background noise that is there at the time.
So you generate also the background noise?
No, I generate only the pure sound, and when it's played, the birds will listen to, in both cases, just the ambient noise and the pure song coming from the loudspeaker. It sounds like a bird inside the box.
Yeah, no, but it was just because if some syllables get lost, it can be because it's just a speculation, but it can be, as you say, because the population shrank. It can also be that the surrounding doesn't allow the birds to hear syllables anymore.
Could have been.
Like experimental sort of idea.
So as a reason of why that syllable could have been lost, because by changing the noisy environment, that one in particular, it would surprise me because it's within the same range of other parts of the syllables, but fair question. I don't know.
I had a quick question about the reduced model, the synthetic sound that you've generated. Yes. Have you thought about what is it that was missing from the original song versus the synthetic? And why does your reduced model work? Like, what is it that was not important that has not been captured by the reduced models? Is there a way to quantify that?
Let me try again. Try me once more.
So I'm wondering, with your reduced models, reduced dimension models, have you tried to quantify what aspects have been captured and what has been lost? I'm just curious, what are the important components that actually require learning and passing on to generations? And what are the parts of the song that can actually be lost and are probably not relevant?
Right. Yeah. So tomorrow, I think that tomorrow in the description of the model, I'm going to be describing this experiment that we did with Anna, in which, because what I showed you today about the bird, listening to the birdsong song and the synthetic copy and working, was the final, the happy ending of the story. There was a side B that I'm going to tell specifically dedicated to the younger people. I went to Chicago and I told Anna's boss, I have this wonderful low-dimensional model. It's great. It synthesizes wonderful song. And he didn't want Anna to work on that line of work, and Anna and I wanted to do that work. So we tried it. We had a great synthetic copy, and there was not a single neuron spiking. It was like the most embarrassing moment in my career. I had gone to Chicago, told that I had this beautiful model. The guy said, well, maybe you're going to have a 50% response. No, that was my friend Dan Margolia's 50% response. We did the experiment and there was not a single neuron spiking, nothing. And I could not hear a difference between the two sounds, and for the bird, it was dramatic. What I didn't include in that model was the oropharyngeal cavity. And I didn't include noise in the signal of the muscles. So we included it. We were lucky because I had no indication that those were the key factors. And then once that we got lucky, we started to modify those parameters and we found that there were optimal values. So part of this success is success in the upper vocal tract. But then for the different species, there is a difference in terms of the normal form that you use to generate the oscillations. If you have a zebra finch that has a very high harmonic content, you have to use what in nonlinear dynamics is a saddle node in a limit cycle bifurcation that will start the oscillations in an explosive way, and they will generate very rich harmonic content. If you have something that is pretty tonal, like the cingolo, you can use a relaxation oscillator, and then you will have a spectral content that is not so dramatic. Then you can go a little bit higher. Why this relaxation oscillator? Well, in a relaxation oscillator, you have a symmetry that is translated into which are the number of harmonics that are important, and that is something that I noticed in cingolo. So there were elements there that suggested that with a relaxation oscillator, this would work. Now, not for every species, I have a systematic study of if I change that aspect, how it would decay. But the way in which I would test your specific question is I would take, for example, if it's a relaxation oscillator, I will change the value of mu, make it smoother, make the spectral content go lower, and then check whether the neurons respond as much or not. This is the kind of experience that I would do to address that particular question.
Comparative aspect to this problem, which is how different are the vocal muscles and the air pathways of different birds, and how those might actually influence or have co-evolved with the neural pathways.
Absolutely, absolutely. That is something that I would love to do if I had time to do a systematic comparative analysis in terms of these simple bifurcations. And yeah, I agree. It's a beautiful program. I would love to do it. If I had more time, I certainly would. Yeah.
Yes, question is similar to that. So people have perturbed just at the spectral level. How much perturbation is tolerated?
So how much is perturbation is?
If you ignore the model generating it, but you take the spectrum and perturb on the spectrum.
Right.
How much perturbation?
So the answer is I don't know. Systematically, I never checked it. What we did check is if instead of using, for example, a saddle node in a limit cycle bifurcation for a zebra finch, and you use just a Hof bifurcation, for example, that is very poor, then it doesn't work. But I didn't do the systematic continuous analysis. And the way I would do it, this is a beautiful experiment that should be done. I would take, for example, I would have to change two parameters to do this. One, the distance from the saddle node to the limit cycle bifurcation up in order to control the harmonic content. And then a gamma factor in the temporal scale of the differential equation to shift it to the fundamental frequency that I want. So I could smoothly change the harmonic content, keeping the same fundamental frequency, and see how you degrade the activity. It would be a beautiful experiment. That's the way I would change it. And I don't know. I checked the limit cases. I copied the spectral content with a saddle node limit cycle bifurcation in the right place, and it worked. And first I had tried with the Hoff, and it didn't work. So I know only the two limits, but it would be beautiful to see which is the resistance to that. Yeah.
I wanted to ask something related to this plot you are showing. So you had played the same song with a regular interval for this. And then when it died down, what is the exact reason why the response of the birds died down? Like they don't find the new bird from...
So the song is only played during this amount of time. So the amount of time the song is played is the length of this segment in here. So it's played during 1 minute, so it's each 20 seconds. So it's played only 3 times. So that is enough to increase up to this level. And then it's mostly tries to figure out that whoever was around left and starts to get tired of trying.
I see. So I was just wondering, suppose you keep playing the song, let's say for an hour or something.
Oh.
Will they, if they don't find the bird?
No, they would stop to pay attention. They will stop to pay attention. So there are a lot of controls you have to do of that regard. That you have to keep the novelty, you have to keep on changing the songs, you have to keep on changing the subjects, you have to keep on changing what you play to each subject. So that's the reason for which the statistics is a nightmare. You have to go to the several, thousands of protocols with different individuals in order to get significance for your data. So it's programmable things. Now you program it and you leave it for hours in the field, but each experiment is just like 3 songs here, okay, and nothing for the rest of the then 10 minutes, 3 songs to another bird, and so on. So they're very slow to accumulate this data. Yeah.
I have just another question. So like we humans can, if I have a room full of people, I can make out sound of a specific person, like among a bunch of people. Can songbirds do something similar? Like if there are several songs coming in, they can kind of tune other things out and learn this particular one?
Well, Alison Dope, who was mentioned today, was expert in directed song. So when, for example, when males are practicing, they generate some song, but when they see the female, they look at her and they repeat it with a little bit faster and with a lot of precision. So there are intentional features in the song, a little bit in the tone of what you were asking earlier, that happen when there is directed interaction. But that I cannot figure out how to model or how to build a robot that would find where the guy. But that would be interesting, though. That would be cool. But I don't know how to do it yet. Yeah.
The last questions? If not, Gabon, thank you very much for a most illuminating, lovely talk and for setting the stage for the remaining 2 talks tomorrow and day after. Thank you very much.
Thank you.